Well, greetings, Cap fans. Welcome to episode 281 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Verbanis, and I've got a co-host, best gosh darn one out there. His name is Bob Lucius. And this is part of the episode where I change up the greeting to Bob. Oh, Bob, I could say I'm Captain America, but it doesn't put wings on my head.
I don't know where that's from. I feel like I
No?
should know, but I don't. I'm drawing
All
a
right.
blank.
Did you watch the Daredevil Netflix series?
I didn't. I
Bob.
know, I know. I was afraid you were going to ask me this, knowing who tonight's guest is, because we've had this discussion probably 8 months ago,
Mm-hmm.
where you chastised me when I said no to that answer, and this was, I think, when season 2 was like halfway out or something, and I told you I'm going to check it out.
Uh-huh. And how'd that
So
go?
it's on my list. It's
Okay.
on my list, man.
All right. You're
On
gonna
my
thank
list.
me.
Yeah.
You're gonna thank me after you
All right.
watch it.
Okay.
Yeah, they had 3 seasons on Netflix, and then I think it was 2015, 16, 17. And then Netflix lost their licensing, and then Disney bought and getting brought it back. And then yes, there's a current series um, that is on Disney Plus, and I can't remember the name of this series, but it's basically picking up where the old one left
All
off.
right. So there's four
Uh,
seasons
yeah, you could
ish.
say that
Yeah.
because the current one they did broke it up into two parts,
Yeah.
8 seasons or 8-ish episodes and eight
Well,
episodes.
that's a lot.
And so I guess you could say there's five then.
Yeah.
And then if you talk about Defenders, which is like a 4 episode miniseries, or maybe it was five, but that had all of the characters that
Mm-hmm.
together, including Matt Murdock. Anyway, great stuff.
Wow.
But Bob,
Wow.
why am I quoting you from episode 9 of season 1, titled "Speak of the Devil"?
Well, we do have a certain writer on tonight, Christos Gage, who was on the writing team for Daredevil,
That's right. I thought
along with his wife.
how perfect it was that I could do an actual Captain America quote from that episode.
Now, you have been waiting on that for 280 plus episodes. So
Something like
finally
that.
got to pull the trigger.
Woo! Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're very excited. We have Christos Gage coming on the show here shortly. He has been a longtime writer, so all types of things, right? So movies, TV shows, video games, comic books, and you name it. But he's been writing comics for over 20 years, and including a couple of cool Captain America tie-ins, and as well as one that is coming up in the next couple of months, where they're Marvel's celebrating the 20th anniversary of Civil War. And so they're going to be doing this 5 issue miniseries and kind of doing a behind the story stories, now finally revealed. And we've got the writer, Christos Gage, on the show.
That's exciting, Rick. You know, hearing about that 5 issue mini series, man, I immediately went to look to see if I could put that on my pull list because that sounds like something I don't want to miss.
Yeah, me
You
too.
know,
Yeah, can't wait to talk with him about that. Bob, you sound a little under the weather.
I am, Rick. We had our winter down here in Florida, and apparently, I think I'm pretty sure. I try to think these things through like a detective, like a special victims unit detective, Rick.
Mm.
Another uh,
Okay.
another Christos Gage writing gig, and
SVU.
I took my son to his last basketball of the season last Friday, and then I took him out to dinner afterwards, and I distinctly remember the woman next to me sneezing twice, and I
Okay.
turned and I went, "Well, God bless you," and she said, "Thank you," and I'm pinning it on her because I think I picked up
Mm.
a cold, and so it's been dogging me this weekend and this part of the week. It's Tuesday night, so but I'm hoping I'm on the mend. It doesn't seem to be getting worse,
Hmm.
which is a good thing,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
So
yeah. All right.
but
Well,
I think it gives me
soldier through.
I think it makes me my voice have a little sexy Ellen Barkin quality. So I like to.
Is that what you're going for? The Helen Barkin?
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, Bob. Yeah, I don't want to keep Christos waiting too long. I just will point out that this is the first Wednesday of the month, which is typically when we have guests on the show. The second Wednesday of the month is when we do our long tail story, where we just keep doing, the next issue, and so we are going to be next episode. We're going to be going back to the classic 1976 story of Jack Kirby's Mad Bomb.
Mm,
So we're going to be doing, I want to say, part three.
three, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, part
Yeah.
three. And if you haven't checked out parts 1 and 2, make sure you do first. Episodes 274 and 278 have that. But more importantly, to get you primed for this conversation with Christos Gage, we did a couple of things in the previous two episodes. Episode 279, we did a recap of Civil War 1 through 7. We had our friend of the show, John Waller Sewell, come on and basically went through the story and talked it through, not acting out or anything like that, but that's what a recap is, right? We just
Hmm.
kind of go through each issue and then talk those through. So that was a real fun conversation. A little lengthy.
A little
Uh,
lengthy.
and then last episode, 280, we did act out. We went panel by panel for the one shot that Christos wrote, which was Iron Man, Captain America, Casualties of War. So check those two out if you haven't yet, or uh,
If you
if you
haven't read,
after hearing from Christos today, if it piques your interest.
yeah, if you haven't read them in 20 years, it's time to read them again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's get Christos out of the green room.
All right.
Our guest today is a New York Times best-selling writer of movies, television, comics, graphic novels, and video games. He was part of the writing staff on the inaugural season of the Netflix Marvel TV show Daredevil. For over 20 years, he has written hundreds of comic books, working with nearly every publisher in the industry. For Marvel, he co created the fan favorite Avengers Academy, writing the entire 40-issue run. And he's also written such titles as Superior Spider Man, Amazing Spider Man, X Men Legacy, Avengers the Initiative, Iron Man, War World Hulk X Men Spider Man, Thunderbolts, and many more. He was also written for DC, including many Justice League and Batman titles, IDW for G.I. Joe Cobra, Dynamite, Red Sonja, Avatar, Absolution, and Crossed, Valiant, Bloodshot, and Hardcore, and Wildstorm as well. Cap fans will probably know his work as writer for the Iron Man Captain America Casualty of War one shot, which we did cover panel by panel in episode 280. He also wrote several video games, including console games Captain America Super Soldier and the mobile game Captain America Winter Soldier. And he is revisiting Civil War for the 20th anniversary with the upcoming Civil War Unmasked miniseries, which will include Captain America. We are very excited to have writer Christos Gage join the show. Chris, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, as I mentioned, you've been writing comics for the last 20 plus years. Maybe you could start with telling us a little bit about your interest in comics, and then how did that translate in turning into a career?
Gosh, well, I've been reading comics as long as I can remember. So we're going back to the mid 70s. And I'm sure I started with like Disney comics, but I don't remember exactly. I know that, you know, I do remember that like one of the first things that got me, actively hooked and collecting was around the time when the uh, John Byrne and Roger Stern era of Captain America was going on. And so that's about when I really seriously started buying and saving comics, not just like buying them and, passing them on to friends or whatever. So I know that, from a Captain America standpoint, I bought from around, I want to say 252 to the end of the original run. Um, so yeah, and
You said saving, so did you still have them?
I do. Yeah, most of them. Some, at one point, I was like, oh, I'm gonna upgrade my copies from the raggedy ones I had when I was a kid, and so I'd buy like a near mint copy and just like toss the old nasty one, the low grade one that I'd read to death, and now I regret that. I wish I had the one that I bought when I was a kid, but a lot of the ones I bought when I was a kid, I still have. And then of course there are ones I bought when I was like 13 years old, and they're still in high grade because I kept them. But like there are a few that I still have. Like I have a Godzilla #2 from the late '70s that's just torn to shreds, but I'm so happy that I still have it. That was the first series I ever really like hardcore saved was Marvel's Godzilla.
Well loved,
Yeah.
as I like to call it.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and so, did you have a favorite character besides Godzilla? When you were younger?
Uh I don't know if I necessarily had an absolute favorite character. I mean, I always liked Spider-Man, which has worked out well because I've written a lot of Spider-Man, both in comics and video games. Um, I wrote for the Spider-Man video game for PlayStation, the Insomniac Games one. I've actually written for all their games that have come out, but I was most involved with the very first one, which is, I believe, is still the best-selling superhero video game of all time.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and it was a lot of fun to do. Um, and I always liked Captain America. I love that Roger Stern, John Byrne run. Not to forget, I believe it was Joe Rubenstein was the anchor the
Yes.
whole time. Um, and so that meant a lot to me. And anyway, oh, you asked how I got into writing comics. I actually I sort of did a reverse of what a lot of people do, um, which was they do comics and then they move into like film and TV. And I went to film school because I had no idea how to get into doing comics. I went to film school, and that's where I met my wife Ruth, and we, started writing. We initially started writing movies, and we would sell scripts and get jobs, but it's very frustrating because a lot of times when you write movies, you they don't get made. Like we literally had a movie come out this year. It's called Grow, and it's actually really fun. It's a family oriented movie about a little girl who has, I guess you'd call it a superpower. She can sort of talk to plants, and she's on a quest to grow the world's largest pumpkin. And it's got all these. It was made in Britain. It's got all these great British actors from you'll recognize from things like Ted Lasso and Bridgerton. Um, and Nick Frost is in it from Hot Fuzz and
Oh,
Shaw.
cool.
Um, and it's been really well received. It's got like a wonderful Rotten Tomatoes rating. Anyway, we wrote it 20 years ago, and it just came out.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
So that tells you how frustrating it can be. So at some point, we made the switch to TV, and we wrote some episodes of Law and Order SVU. And right around that time, I met Jimmy Palmiotti, who is still a friend, and he's a really great guy. And we kept in touch. And I happened to be going to New York for the shooting of one of our Law and Order SVU episodes, and Jimmy was kind enough to set up a lunch with Dan DiDio, who was the editor in chief of DC Comics at the time. And we had lunch, and I pitched him an idea for a Deadshot miniseries, which they bought, and that was the first comic I did was Deadshot, and it was well received. And then at a convention in LA, I approached the Marvel booth, and I introduced myself to Mark Paniccia, and who I'm actually doing a thing with right now. Time is a Flat Circle, and Tom Brevoort. And Tom gave me a tryout on a Spider-Man uh, story. At the time, they had a book called Spider-Man Unlimited, which had two stories in each issue. Um, and he gave me a story with Mike McCone, who I later ended up creating Avengers Academy with. And that was a lot of fun. And not that, and then I did Union Jack.
Hmm.
And after that, um, they, uh, so when Civil War was coming out, uh, Mark Millar. My understanding, I may be getting this wrong, but my understanding is that Mark Millar, who, uh, as people may or may not know, has Crohn's disease, um, had a flare up of it, I think, and he was ill and he was not able to make he not able to make the deadline on one of the issues of Civil War, so it was late. So Andy Schmidt, who was the assistant editor for Tom at the time, called me up and was like, "Hey, can you do a one shot about Iron Man and Captain America and how they could get to this point where they're opposing each other like this, that looks at their past and so that it, makes sense." Because some people are saying, hey, it doesn't make sense that they would actually come to blows like this. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, there was that time when they fought during the Armor Wars. And then there was that
Mm-hmm.
other time when, this and that happened. And he was like, okay, great. Sounds like you know a lot about their past. And I was like, well, yeah, I've been reading comic books for, at the time it was only a paltry 30 years or whatever it was. Um, and now it's 50 years. But so yeah, I wrote it in a week, and they liked it, and it came out, and it did really well, and that was like my first big, my first, like big selling comic. So I was very excited, and so now 20 years later, again, time is a flat circle. I'm doing the Civil War 20th anniversary miniseries, Civil War Unmasked, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I absolutely want to talk about that. But let's get back to what you just talked about. Your first big Marvel comic, right? Because you had done as you mentioned, the Union Jack miniseries with
Yep.
friend of the show artist Mike Perkins,
Oh yeah,
who's a wonderful gentleman. Love him.
delightful.
And so here you are. You have this one shot, and as you mentioned, yeah, there was a little bit of delay with the regular series. So this came out between Civil War number 5 and 6,
Okay.
and I remember because I had a comic book store back at the time. I remember all this stuff on the shelf, and and it's a 38-page one shot, right? So
Yes.
it's got some meat to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about getting into kind of like the history of those, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I have to ask, you probably read the first one or two issues of the Civil War at this point, like maybe they had been out.
Yeah, they sent me the scripts too, to the other
Okay,
ones that were up
all
to
right.
that point.
Well, up to that point, were you Team Cap or were you Team Iron Man?
So up to that point, like as a fan and reader, I was Team Cap, but I also understood that if I actually had to live in this world, I would be Team Iron Man.
Mhm.
So that was always my viewpoint. I was like, well, I mean, I'm Team Cap because I don't want my heroes that I love to have to register and reveal their identities to the government. Having said that, if these people actually existed in the real world, damn right I'd want someone, watching over them,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that they didn't blow up my town. So yeah, that was kind of my fence sitting attitude. But
What?
it at the same time, it actually made me feel like that was good because at the same time, when you write it, you have to be able to understand everybody's perspective.
Mhm. I think we just reviewed it, all the issues, and
Awesome.
we had a long discussion throughout and after about, like, yeah, we're Cap fans, like, of course we're Team Cap, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, in the real world, there's a lot of ambiguities, there's a lot of grays, and I think, of course, for the drama, it, you got to have this tension between Cap and Iron Man,
Mm-hmm.
the pro
Yeah.
and the anti forces. It has to lead to a conclusion, right? But your one shot showed that there was potentially another way,
Mm-hmm.
right? And which maybe is the real world way, where people just try to work out those differences,
Yeah.
right? And
Well, it was interesting because when Andy actually called me, I said, you know what I'd like to do is something like the diner scene in the movie Heat, um, and you know, but obviously with a fight.
Right. Yeah,
um,
it's like
and
Tom Brevoort said. You gotta have at some point they have to.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a comic book.
yeah, yeah, and but yeah, so that was kind of it. And actually, I just thought of another project I did, which was a back then, which was a what if Civil War thing, where and it had a couple different stories in it, and then like a framing sequence that Ed Brubaker wrote, and that one I did a what if like Civil War hadn't happened. So in that one, or it kind of did start to happen, but
Yeah.
there's a point where you know Tony and Cap like are go to shake hands, and one of them has like a scrambler device in his hand. I can't even remember which one. Uh, but in the what if, like they actually do shake hands and like, all right, let's talk about this, and then they work it out, and it's one of these things where everything works out great, and they fix everything, and Bill Foster doesn't get killed, and but the thing is, the Watcher is showing this to Tony after Cap is killed in the mainstream
Mm-hmm.
universe, so it's
Mhm.
like torture for him to see this, uh,
Yeah.
and Ed did a great job with his framing sequence. He's like, "Oh my god!" And then he ended it with one of these great Watcher things where he's like, "But some of us can only watch or whatever."
Mhm.
Well, like the Phantom Stranger, where he always has to say, "But I am but a stranger."
Mhm.
It's great. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
So when you wrote Casualties of War, it was obvious you did a lot of research, right? Because
Well,
there's many
over
references to Steve and
my
Tony's
previous
history.
lifetime, I did a lot of research. Yeah.
Yeah. So with this being, like, if you could put yourself in that mindset, right? This being your first Marvel story featuring flagship characters,
hmm
what was your reaction to landing this assignment, and how did you approach it?
I was like, it's funny because, like, I think I want to say I was like, I don't know how old I was. I was like in my early 30s, but which is not that young, but I was younger than I am now. Let me tell you, and I was just raring to go. I was like, a funny story about Union Jack. When I first, it had a lot of characters in it, but when I first was pitching it to Andy, it had so many more characters in it, and he was like, "You don't want this many characters." And he's like, "Yeah, I do." And he's like, "Not this many. You're gonna. It's gonna be too many. It's gonna be unwieldy." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right." And then later, I read an interview with Brian Bendis where he said, "The first time you get a job at Marvel, you assume you're gonna get fired right away. So you try to play with as many of the toys as possible, as quickly as possible before they realize their mistake and fire you." And that is 100% true. So I kind of got that out of my system on Union Jack. And so for this one, I was like, I just got to do a really good job on this and make it work and make sense and, fit with the story and be true to the history of these characters that I've been reading my whole life. So that's what I was trying to do and get right, but also not be just a clip show. I didn't want it to be you know what I mean by a clip show?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
just a bunch of flashbacks.
yeah, yeah. Because back in the day of network television, we had these things called clip shows where characters would get caught where they had run through the budget for the season, and characters would get caught in like a bank vault and be like, "Remember that time when this happened?" And then they show a clip from an old show. This is for the young people out there who don't know what clip shows are. And so, I wanted it to work, and I was just like, I just got to do a really good job on this. And after it came out, like a lot of people would say to me, "You know what? When I read that, it finally made sense to me that this could actually happen. Before, I wasn't really buying it that these two would actually get to this point, but then you made it make sense for me, and I appreciated that because that was kind of what I was going for. So uh, that was what I was trying to do. So that was kind of my approach, and I'm actually really glad that it wasn't like my first job at Marvel, because I would have messed it up by trying to be like, "Hey, let me put I don't know, let me put Hawkeye in here too," and that would have been bad.
Well, that, I mean, you raise an interesting point, right? Because it's two characters
Yeah.
in Casualties of War. I mean, you don't have the supporting characters, the supporting voices. You've got two, and they're two of the most established characters that have
Mm-hmm.
been treated by dozens of different writers
Yeah.
in different ways over the
Yeah.
course of history. I mean, we talk frequently on the show about Captain America has changed dramatically over the course of, at that point, what, 7 decades, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now even more. So when you're doing that and you've got two of these seminal characters that are facing off, like, how do you find the voice of those characters in a way that, pays tribute to what's come before, but is authentically you as a writer.
Yeah, well, it's a matter of, you know, just as well, first of all, there was a accepted version of Cap at the time for Marvel, so you got to be true to that. I mean, it's actually in a way it was lucky that I had done TV first, because when you go to work on a TV show, like when you go to write for Law and Order SVU, for example, your job is not to like redefine how that show sounds and feels. Your job is to write to the way that show sounds and feels, you know. Um, and that's your job with any TV show. You're trying to capture the voice of the show. Uh, so that's kind of what I was doing. Was like, okay, I was already reading Captain America and Iron Man, but I was sort of trying to capture who they are, and it's more accepted in comics. Like, when like it's like Brian Bendis's run on something ends, and then the next writer comes in, whoever they may be. Like, let's say it's Jason Aaron. Fans accept that Jason Aaron's version of the character is going to sound a little bit different, but not drastically different. It's still going to be that character, let's say. Um, but on TV, for example, like Law and Order, Mariska Hargitay's character is not going to suddenly talk very differently one season to the next. So yeah, so it's your job as a writer to understand who that person is. At the same time, you acknowledge what's come before, but over the years there have been explanations for example, for why Captain America Commie Smasher in the 50s sounded differently from Silver Age Cap. It's like, well, it was a different dude because our Cap was frozen in the ice, and that Cap was slowly going crazy because of this formula in his body, and blah blah blah, and we all know that because we're all Cap fans here. Mm-hmm. It was just a matter of knowing the voice, knowing the character, knowing the history of it. I mean, like I always say to people, it's almost like I almost had to do this as a job, because for one thing, I'm terrible at everything else. Like, I'm not just talking about like cool things, like everything. Like, I can't bag groceries. Like, I'm terrible at bagging groceries.
Yeah.
Terrible at digging ditches. I'm terrible at everything. And I'm not saying I'm great at this, but like I'm okay at it, right? But and like I've been practicing for this my whole life by reading comic so I've been rehearsing for it the whole time. So
yeah. Well, let me ask you this. We had this discussion when we reviewed the Civil War miniseries, and a couple of the folks on the show, including me, because it wasn't obvious to me at first, felt that maybe a little bit of Cap's voice in the series had a little bit of an ultimate Cap in there as well. Did you get that sense as well?
So I'm going to be perfectly honest. I haven't reread Civil War in yet, especially for Cap, because the Cap issue of Civil War Unmasked is the last one, and I haven't written that one yet. So I don't quite remember. I mean, it would make sense because Mark Millar was writing Ultimates, and then Civil War. But they are different people. Like, Ultimate Cap is the one who's like, do you think this A on my forehead stands for France?
Right. Yeah.
Classic line. Yeah.
616 Cap is more, kinder and less, in your face.
Right. Less aggressive.
Yeah. But I don't know.
Chris, I feel like he was leading the witness here, with his. Do you think it sounded like Mark, Ultimate Captain America? Because that we had a disagreement on that.
Okay.
I personally did not. So when you're writing this issue number 5 of please go with your gut. Don't let Bob lead you into an Ultimate Captain America version.
He's probably going to sound more like the Roger Stern Captain America.
There you go.
All right. You'll have a lot of fans there.
Yeah. Oh goodness. Well, we do have a few questions from our patrons, Chris.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. First one is from Mark Domeyer, who writes, Christos, big fan of Avengers Academy and Superior Spider-Man. I'm curious how much difference there is between writing a video game and other types of more traditional stories.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So video game writing is really its own beast. Like when you're writing a console game and you're writing the cinematics, which are the scenes that play out between gameplay that are like
Do we call those cutscenes?
they can be called cutscenes. They're also called cinematics
All right.
because they're like cinema. They're recorded and they play like a scene from a movie. Um,
I just wanted to show off my knowledge, Chris. I played like about 20 minutes of Call of Duty, so I
oh,
felt
there
like I
you go.
needed to,
I think they are called cutscenes. I call them cinematics. And then sometimes, you like you're not really playing using the controller in them unless you're doing one of those where you just mash the button because you've got to like, you're Spidey and you've got to lift up the heavy object, or
yeah.
whatever. But yeah, so that's a lot like just a regular script. But then a lot of other times you're doing things like, you know, they send you an Excel spreadsheet and it's like, okay, here we need 15 lines of, uh, one of Mr. Negative's henchmen reacting to sounds of, they might have heard Spider-Man slinking around, this one, and it's like, 10 lines of, you know, they heard Spidey, but they're not quite sure, 10 lines of, they've decided it's nothing, 10 lines of, they're going to investigate further, and, those can be challenging, but at the same time, it's really, really good training as a writer because it works your muscles and it helps you to think on your feet. Because really, what it is come up with 10 ways of saying I need to go over there, um, and do it fairly quickly, and that really helps when like let's say you're on a TV set and for whatever reason the line that is in the script isn't working and they come to you and say all right, come up with something else, and you've got to do it, and everyone's looking at you and every moment that you're not doing it is costing a lot of money, what I'm saying. So uh, but a lot of video game writing is doing exactly that. It's coming up with you know however many different ways of saying the same thing, or um and then there's fun stuff like coming up with quips for Spidey to say when he's fighting bad guys,
Hmm.
and and then there's I loved on the Spider-Man games. I loved writing the J. Jonah Jameson rants. Like in the first game, the idea was that he had a podcast instead of he had retired from being a Daily Bugle's editor in chief, and he had like this podcast where he just went off on these rants, often about Spider-Man. And I believe it or not, I'm able to channel the voice of a crotchety middle-aged man. Uh,
I was going to ask if these seeped into your everyday life in any way.
well, it was so funny because at the time, I've never really listened to talk radio, but I listened to like quite a bit of talk radio and to research this, and I was like, well, the first thing I came away with was like, these people will listen to a lot of commercials.
For
Yeah.
gold. Yeah.
Yeah, for gold, yeah, and anything related to an imminent disaster of some sort. Uh, and but the other thing that was great was like when you really listen to like the conspiracy theorist types like the Alex Joneses, um, it's like they get really wound up, so but then I had so much fun doing, like one of the lines people always remember that I had a lot of fun writing was he's like, before Spider-Man, crime was normal and now we get this and this and this and Nazis made of bees. And the guy who Darren DePaul, who was doing the voice of Jonah Jameson, knew exactly that it was a reference to Swarm, the villain Swarm. He's like, oh yeah, I remember the comics with Swarm. That was great. I loved recording that line. Thanks so much. It's so much fun. Everybody was, this everyone that worked on the game was a huge fan, so it was a real labor of love.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of lines and recordings, voice actors. So for the Captain America Super Soldier video
Yeah.
game, so the cast of the first Captain America movie provided voices.
Yeah.
What was that like? Seeing Chris Evans voicing your script, I mean, as a screenwriter, you've seen that plenty of times, I'm sure, but knowing the impact of the MCU, was this different at all?
It was super exciting. And like, now I wasn't there at the time. I don't know. It was done over a fairly brief period. Like it was done over the course of like 2 days. or maybe 3. I don't know how many. Anyway, I wasn't. I was out of town. I can't remember why. It had nothing to do with the game. Like I was just like visiting family or something. So it's not like I was there, but it was so awesome to have them do it. Like everybody, like Sebastian Stan, um, you know, Haley Atwell. Everybody did their characters. I think the only exception was the guy who did the Red Skull, who wasn't in it much anyway. But like he was overseas. But everybody was terrific, and they did such a good job. Um, it was really awesome. It was great. I was super excited, and I wasn't sure if they were going to when I was writing the lines, but it didn't really change my approach. But seeing them do it was just awesome. I mean, yeah, I don't really know what else to say about that, but it's always a thrill when because when you're writing, you have some idea of what you think they're going to deliver the lines as, but uh, exciting to see what they bring to it because there's always something you don't expect. Like, and it kind of reminds me of I've worked a lot with Dan Slott, and he'll plot and I script. And one time I asked him, when he works alone, he writes the plot and then the artist draws it and then he writes the script. And I said to him, why do you like to work that way? And he said, because when I see the art, it gives me new ideas about what to write. And I was like, oh, that's really smart. So even though I haven't changed, I still write full script. It's made me more open to, once the art comes in, sometimes changing lines. Like if it looks like, maybe one character seems angry in a pen, I'll be like, oh, maybe I'll make his line more angry, because he looks angry. Or if another character, seems, I don't know, whatever, I'll be more open to letting it, not being like held to what I already wrote just because I already wrote it, just being open to bringing something new to it, being a little more, letting the collaboration work more. And that's kind of the fun part about when actors deliver your lines, because they often bring something to it that you weren't expecting in a good way. I mean, sometimes in a bad way, but usually that's when you're working on like low budget stuff. And
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Well, and not only are they voicing your lines, but I read that Chris Evans and the Russo brothers, the directors, took inspiration from the game when it came to choreographing the action scenes in Captain America: Winter Soldier.
yeah, apparently so. And I read that in interviews, and I can't take any of the credit for that. It was all the the people who you know animated the game. And I'm not sure if it was the stunt actors or the animators or who, but I the interview I read, Chris Evans said that he because obviously they sent him a copy of the game, and he had a lot of fun playing it. And when he went to meet with the Russo brothers, he said, hey, in this game, the fighting style they did was really fun, and maybe we can bring something like that to the movie. And they were like, oh yeah, we felt the same way. So
That's cool.
that was really cool to hear.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we've got another patron, big fan of the games,
Mhm.
Matthew Glover, and he writes, "I'm a big fan of the Super Soldier video game. Can you tell us more about writing for the game? And do you think it's MCU canon?"
So I'll answer the second question first. I have no idea. Way above my pay grade.
Right.
Um, I don't know. I can't even tell you if you know. I can tell you where it fits in the movie, which is like during the montage where Captain America and the Howling Commandos are like. There's a montage where they're doing cool stuff.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
fighting and doing cool stuff. So it fits right in there. Um, but whether it officially does, I have no idea. Um, but what was it like writing for the game? It was a lot of fun. They flew me up to. They wanted someone who had experience both with comics and with screenwriting, which is why they approached me. And they flew me up to. Can't remember. If, I've done a lot of video games. I can't remember if it was Canada or the Pacific Northwest. I think it was Canada. Um, and we talked, and they already had the idea of a like this old castle that Hydra had sort of turned into a Hydra base. But then they were like, we're totally open to whatever villains you want. And I was like, oh, and I was throwing out all these invaders villains like, Iron Cross, who they used. And I really pitched Baron Blood, but they were like, well, right now there aren't any. The studios said, right now there aren't any vampires in the Marvel Universe, in the MCU. And I was like, Blade. And they were like, Blade right now isn't canon. And I was like, come on. And didn't work. I tried to get Baron Blood in there.
That would have been awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. But I also pitched Madam Hydra. I was like, let's say Madam Hydra, is a title that, has been passed down through the generations. So we have a Madam Hydra here. She's just really crazy and shoots, a lot of guns. But anyway, that was.
Wait a minute, Madam Hydra, you say?
Yeah.
Tell me a little more about her.
I saw Rick's eyes sparkling.
Yeah, I'm trying to come up with Cap villains, and so I said, let's put Madam Hydra in there, and the villain Madam Hydra, aka Viper, in the present day is like this, and it couldn't be her, but we would have a character like her, who was like her predecessor. So that was really it. And she's in the game, and she's kind of crazy homicidal and has twin machine guns that she fires, and it was fun. I enjoyed playing the game.
Yeah.
I have to definitely check that out. Now I don't have a lot of video game experience in the last, say, 10, 15 years, but maybe I need to check that out.
I got to tell you, I have not played that game, Christos, but I'm immediately getting on to my Xbox tonight. Cool. And seeing if I can download that legacy game, because I'm looking at it right now and I'm like, this looks awesome.
I had fun with it. I'm not just saying that because I worked on it. I mean, I had a lot of fun with it. There are things in it because, and something that video games don't do anymore, which I'm glad they don't do, is tie the releases to the release of a movie, because that usually ends up in them being released before they're really ready for release.
Yeah.
And what they smartly did with this game was they knew how much time they had, and they didn't try to overextend themselves. And what that resulted in, like when the game came out, the only real criticism we got is it's too short. And it's shorter than like most other games of its type. But that's because they only had so much time before the movie was going to come out, and they needed it to come out when the movie came out. But they did a really, really good job with it, and it's a lot of fun to play. But the only other thing that I found kind of silly is like when there's debris in the way, like a desk or whatever, or some boxes, like you have to find another way around it, and it's like Olympic level athlete can't climb over these boxes, but it's you accept it,
right? Yeah, it's an artifact. Yeah.
I do have a question about another comic series that you had written, because you had a long history of writing Avengers Initiative.
Yes.
And in the penultimate issue, number 34, you actually have Steve Rogers. He shows up for the big battle, and he's there battling. Taskmaster basically comes up. He sees this basically as an opportunity to take him out and prove himself, right? But Steve passes him off to Bucky Cap, and Taskmaster recognizes the new Cap as Bucky, and he says, quote, "You're Bucky, the original dead sidekick. Alive. Man, ain't anything sacred anymore." And at this point, Bucky had been back in real time maybe 4 or 5 years. And I know there was a little bit of controversy, of people saying, well, Uncle Ben and Bucky, right? Like those are the constants of staying dead. Was this line from Taskmaster, was this a slight jab at bringing him back at all?
It wasn't. It was really just a little bit breaking the fourth wall, and the sort of thing that if I was writing Deadpool, I would have Deadpool say it wasn't really me taking a position one way or the other. Like my position on anything is what you do with it good? Then it was a good idea to do it. So that's how I feel about it. Was bringing back Bucky a good idea? If you asked me before you did it, I would say no, it's not a good idea. But what Ed did with it was great, and so yeah, it was a good idea. Um, but yeah, it was kind of me just sort of like a wink and a nudge at breaking the fourth wall. It's like yeah, there's some controversy about this, so Taskmaster's just giving voice to that. Um, but yeah, it was a little bit, and I had forgotten about that line, and now I'm kind of cringing a little bit because it's like, come on, that was me amusing myself, and I probably shouldn't have done it. But
Well,
yeah,
you
no,
amused me too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's like an inside joke,
Deadpool. Yeah, it's
within
really
Yeah.
more suited
to,
to Deadpool
yeah.
and Taskmaster.
Yeah. So, what can you tell us about the upcoming Civil War Unmasked miniseries?
Yeah,
I,
so
I I understand it's kind of like a never before told stories kind of behind the event.
yes, exactly. So it's celebrating the 20th anniversary of Civil War, um, and the idea is it's a 5-issue miniseries. Each issue looks at a moment from an untold story, as you say, from the original Civil War, and each issue sort of spotlights a different character. So the characters it looks at are uh, Iron Man, Captain America, Spider Man, Tigra, and Goliath. Um, and the artist is Edgar Salazar, who's doing a terrific job, and we have the original colorist Maury Hollowell from the original Civil War, doing an amazing job. And Steve McNiven, the original Civil War artist, is doing alternate covers. And it's just I'm having a lot of fun with it. I just started writing issue 4, um, and yeah, I think that about covers it.
Yeah, I think the first issue comes out in just a couple of months, so May 6th. So definitely recommend everybody out there to put this on their list. It's interesting that you brought up the same colorist from the original Civil War. When we had Tom Brevoort on the show, he did mention some of the like the importance of a colorist for continuity. And
Mm-hmm.
so now that you mention it, because we just recently revisited Civil War, and it did have a certain feel to it, and the colors has a big part of that.
Yeah.
So I think that was actually, I mean, obviously it was intentional, right, to bring
Yeah.
this colorist back to
Oh
have
yeah.
that feel. But yeah, have you? Is there any colorists like that you've worked with on a regular basis that you have a particular like? Oh, I know we're going to get top notch when this colorist is on.
I mean, I'll be honest, and I think this probably comes from starting out my career working with DC and then going to Marvel, a year later. It I've always worked with top-notch colorists, so I haven't really had any bad experiences, knock on wood. Um, but yeah, and actually, this is something that Jimmy Palmiotti, who I was talking about before, always talks about the importance of the colorist. Um, to the success of a book. And I totally agree with that because it's like you said, it's the importance of the tone, the look of it, so much that people I don't think who read the books really realize. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of certain books that, like I remember on Thunderbolts, I think that was Frank Darmada when it was the bad guys were the Thunderbolts. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was the choices he made on that, and I don't understand color theory enough to explain why, but it just looked different when it was the bad guys as the Thunderbolts. Like not, I mean, it was always bad guys, but for a while it was bad guys who were sincerely trying to reform, and then it was
Right.
bad guys just being bad guys posing as heroes, but they were not. There were some of them who were actually trying, still good people, but it was Norman Osborn running it, and then there was like Venom, but it was Scorpion as Venom, and you know, just insane psychos,
Mm-hmm.
and so the coloring on that volume of the book was perfect for that and brought the mood that you needed. So yeah, that's an example of when it really makes a difference. And like when you think of any book that you know you really like, the coloring probably has a lot to do with it. And I think it's noticed a lot when you see uh, a lot of times I see people complain about sort of reprints that are done of books from um, past eras that are done on different types of paper.
Yeah.
And it's because the original colorist understood that it was going to be printed on newsprint and colored it with that in mind. And now it's being printed, let's say, on glossy paper. Uh, and it comes out looking different. And again, I don't understand it well enough to explain why this is the case, but it comes out looking different, and it doesn't have quite the same effect. So I apologize for not being, not having a good enough understanding to articulate it, but it's super important. And the same thing with lettering. Like I was just talking with somebody about Tom Orzechowski, who was the letterer on so many important books like Uncanny X-Men during the Claremont, Byrne, Austin era, and he always does such amazing work, and people don't realize it. On Battle World, here's another example. Our letterer did a thing where Hank Pym was shrinking, and he had some dialogue balloons, and each successive dialogue balloon was a little bit smaller because he's shrinking as he's
That's
talking.
awesome.
That was such a great touch, and
Yeah.
it just worked so well.
No. Getting back to the Civil War Unmasked, you mentioned each issue features kind of like a different character behind the scene. Is there anything that is pulling all five issues together, like something that ties them all together, like a beginning end type of thing?
Not so much all of them. There is a little bit of connectivity in the sense that, like, the main character, excuse me. So, like, the main character of the first one is Iron Man, Tony Stark, and then main character of the second one is Spider Man, but Tony's in it a little bit as a supporting character. Um, so there's often a little bit like that. So you know, whoever the character was in the previous issue is often a supporting character in the next one. So there's that kind of connectivity, but it's not like in the end all five of them will team up. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
not quite that overt,
Did
Right.
but yeah, there is a bit of connectivity.
did they give you that roster, or I mean,
No,
obviously Iron Man, Captain America are kind of
I
two
was
key ones, but
it was suggested to me that it would be a good idea to have like some of the bigger name characters in it, like not to make it all like, typeface and prodigy, you know what I mean?
right.
But I mean that's what I would have done anyway. No, uh I pitched what to do, and it was all based on like who I could come up with stories for.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, Tigra was one I initially pitched Skrull Hank Pym because like I just love the Hank Pym character, as you probably figured out by now, over the past 20 years. But like Skrull Hank Pym, there was some concern that like, you know, you're kind of doing two events. You're doing what was it called? Secret Invasion
Yeah.
Yeah.
and Civil War, and it's a little bit confusing. And then in the original Civil War, even though it was Skrull Hank Pym, nobody knew it was Skrull, and it might be like too much explaining. And I thought about it and I was like, you know what? That's true. And then I also thought about, what was never really explained is why Tigra was a double agent between the two teams.
Good
And
point. Yeah.
that's kind of an interesting thing to look
Yeah.
at. And I kind of know why I think she would do that. So let me just explain that.
Hmm.
So stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that Tiger issue because,
Mhm.
you did use her a lot in Avengers Initiative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And Avengers Academy.
yeah. So, but that happened after the fact, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happened behind the scenes during Civil War. So
Hmm.
looking forward to that.
Yeah.
What else are you working on? Any other projects coming up that you can share with the listeners?
So there are two things that one that's a short 8-page story that I did that I cannot mention because it hasn't been announced yet, and then another mini series that I can't mention because it hasn't been announced yet. Um, Other than that, I think the collected edition of Battle World will be coming out soon. Um, and
Bucky fans should pick that up.
Yeah,
Bucky
I'm gonna
fans
pick
picked
that
that.
up.
It was a fun like um, buddy dynamic that came out between, because one of the characters in it was Spider-Man when he just started, like, circa Amazing Spider-Man number 4. Okay,
Hmm.
so he was really inexperienced and young. He was like 15 years old, and him and Bucky. And I didn't know this was going to happen until I started writing it. Him and Bucky kind of became buddies, and Bucky's like 17, so but like he's the grizzled veteran, and
Yeah.
Spidey's like this sort of rookie who's freaking out about everything. And they became buddies, and it was really fun, this dynamic between them that developed just like on its own while I was writing it. So that was a lot of fun.
Mm.
Um, anyway, that's coming out soon. Yeah, these days my main gig is a video game called DC Dark Legion, which is a mobile phone game. um, I've been working on that for like 3 years now. It's a good gig, nice solid gig. More it like when you're a freelancer, you don't get steady gigs very often, so it's nice when you do have one.
Mm.
And then I still do about like one comic a month. So there's not a ton of comics out there, but yeah, I think those are all the things uh, that I can mention.
Well, listen, we appreciate you spending some time and talking about them with us.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and it was a real pleasure having you on the show, and thanks for wrapping cap with us.
Yeah. Hey, it's always my pleasure to rap. Let's rap with Cap, as they say, as they
But
said in my day.
but now you've added to my reading pile and apparently my video game playing list. So there goes my weekend.
Look, if you need to make some room, you can send me those comics behind you.
Fair enough.
Well, that was a fun conversation with Chris. I know he was like you, kind of
Mhm.
recovering from feeling a little under the weather, so he was quite the trooper, and we really did enjoy our conversation with him.
Yeah, I did. It was a short conversation, but I feel like I learned a lot from him, Rick.
Hmm.
Learned a lot about just the different mediums that he's written for. But also, I was really struck by his comments about colorists and even letterers, which is something that we have talked about before on the show. We've had a
Hmm.
number of colorists and even a letterer on the show. And that's not something folks talk about a lot,
Right.
and he had a real sensitivity for that and the importance to just the have a story hit somebody.
Hmm. I am looking forward to that upcoming story as far as the behind the scenes with Civil War, because it was such an impactful story,
Yeah,
and I can't wait to kind of see just fleshing it out, right? I
yeah.
don't think we're going to retcon anything, but it's like different writers we've had on the show where they talk about dancing between the raindrops, right?
Right.
Like, how do you flesh out that story a little bit more?
Yeah,
So I'm looking forward to that.
I wanted one more issue in that series for the Punisher,
Mm,
because what was that all about? He just sort of floated in, floated out,
yeah.
got beaten up, shot a guy, shot another guy,
Hmm.
and was on his way. But he sort of had a very kind of an important role.
Oh, he did. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you ever read the story afterwards when Steve was dead and the Punisher where he kind of wore that red, white, and blue costume?
Very briefly. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I'm trying to remember the art. Was that Acuna that did the art
I
for
can't
that?
recall. I can't
The
recall.
same guy who did the Avengers Twilight. I want to say it was, but I could be wrong. Yeah, that was interesting. And way to go, man! Trying to lead the witness there with did you also agree and think that he sounded a little bit more like
Well,
alternate Captain America?
I might have led him a little bit, but it did sound like an appropriate question since we were talking about, finding the voice of the characters. And we did
Hmm.
have that a very, interesting conversation in our recap of Civil War.
Oh,
So
great! Now this miniseries he's working on because he hasn't written the Cap issue yet. He's gonna is cat.
it planted the mind bug.
I know.
Could go
Yeah.
either way. Could just, rebound either way. So
I guess so.
yeah.
And we're gonna close this up, but just want to give a big shout out to everybody who's listening. Maybe this is the first time you're listening. Check us out on Facebook. We have an amazing Facebook group that we launched in 2020. Over 5,000 Cap fans there. We just talk about Cap comic books, and it's several posts a day. But it's such a positive community. And if you're just looking for an oasis away from the rest of the world and maybe some of the toxic stuff that happens with and other social media places. Our group is not that. And we really live by the what would Cap do kind of mentality. So make sure you check that out for Captain America Comic Book Fans Facebook group.
Yeah. And it's not accidental, Rick. I mean, you do a lot of work as the admin, and I know the moderators work, but the members do too. It takes discipline, but it also takes a commitment to that. What would Cap do? And just trying to create an inclusive, happy space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know what would make us happy? If you rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening, and give us a 5-star review if you're on Apple. Leave us a message there. You can leave us a message on YouTube or the aforementioned Facebook group. That always makes us smile, is seeing your positive remarks. So thank you for doing that. Bob, any final words for this episode?
No, I am looking forward to next week, Rick, when my voice is not nearly as sexy.
Well, you and Ellen Barkin. All right. For Bob Lucius, I'm Rick Verbanis, and you have been listening to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.